Keanu Reeves steps into the chaos of West Side Auto Repair, shocked to see greed and injustice ruling the shop. But when young mechanic Liam Carter stands up for an elderly man denied a simple fix, Keanu sees hope. As Liam battles the ruthless manager and fights for honest service, Keanu uncovers a system he unknowingly let fester. Together they face off against corruption, risking it all to turn the garage into a beacon of fairness. Can one act of courage spark real change? Or will the weight of a broken system crush their fight? Stay tuned to find out how honesty can rewrite the rules. Keanu, disguised as Mark Johnson, stood quietly in the shadows, his sharp eyes scanning the garage. He'd built this chain of auto shops to help people, not to exploit them, but the complaints piling up, overcharges, shoddy repairs, desperate customers, had forced him to see for himself. Under the grease-stained cap and faded uniform, he was still the same man who believed in fairness. But what he witnessed now made his stomach churn. The manager, Greg Holloway, was a bulldog of a man, barking orders and squeezing every dime from those who couldn't fight back. Keanu had stayed silent too long, trusting his empire to run itself. But now he felt the weight of his mistake. Across the floor, Liam Carter, just 20, wiped oil from his hands, his jaw tight with frustration. He'd seen too much. Customers turned away, bills padded, trust broken. When an elderly man, Mr. Henry, shuffled in, his trembling hands clutching a worn wallet, Keanu's attention sharpened. Mr. Henry's voice was soft but steady as he pleaded for a belt replacement he couldn't fully pay for up front. Greg's response was cold and final. "We're not a charity. Pay in full or leave." The old man's shoulders slumped, but before he could turn away, Liam stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. "I'll handle it. No charge." Keanu's heart skipped. This kid, young, scrappy, and fearless, wasn't just another employee. He was a spark in a dark system, and Keanu couldn't look away. Greg's face darkened, his bulk looming as he snarled at Liam. "You're digging your own grave, Carter. Do this, and you're out." But Liam didn't flinch. He grabbed his tools, his movements quick and sure, fixing the belt in minutes while Greg muttered threats. The old man's eyes glistened with gratitude as he thanked Liam, who waved it off, but the defiance in his stance told Keanu this wasn't just about one repair. It was personal. For Keanu, the moment was a wake-up call. He'd let this rot fester, distancing himself from the ground level, trusting reports over reality. Now, watching Liam stand up to Greg, he felt a mix of admiration and guilt. This wasn't the shop he'd envisioned, a place where people like Mr. Henry were dismissed like trash. Liam's act wasn't just kindness, it was a challenge to everything Keanu had ignored. He scribbled notes on his clipboard, his mind racing. Could one honest kid really shift a system built on lies? Greg wasn't done. He stormed over, his voice low and venomous. "You think you're a hero, Carter? You're replaceable." Liam met his glare, undeterred. "Maybe, but I'm not letting you screw people over. Not today." The air crackled with tension, and Keanu felt it too, the weight of a decision he couldn't avoid. He'd come here to observe, but now he was a witness to a fight he couldn't ignore. Liam's courage wasn't reckless. It was raw, born from a deep sense of right and wrong that Keanu had lost sight of. Inside, Keanu wrestled with his role. He was the owner, the one who could end this. But he'd stayed silent for too long, letting managers like Greg run wild. Liam's defiance wasn't just against Greg, it was against a culture Keanu had failed to stop. The young mechanic's anger mirrored his own frustration, but where Keanu had hesitated, Liam acted. It stung, but it also inspired. This wasn't just about one garage or one old man, it was about reclaiming the purpose Keanu had started with. As Liam finished, Mr. Henry drove off, his tail lights fading, but the impact lingered. Greg shot Liam a final warning glare before stomping off, leaving a heavy silence. Keanu stayed back, his disguise still intact, but his resolve hardening. He saw in Liam not just a worker, but a leader, a reminder of why he'd built this business in the first place. The question wasn't whether Liam could change the system, it was whether Keanu would stand with him. For the first time in years, Keanu felt the fire of responsibility reignite. This fight was his to join, and he knew it wouldn't be easy. But as he watched Liam wipe his hands and return to work, Keanu made a silent vow. No more hiding. The truth was out, and he was ready to act. Keanu lingered near the back of West Side Auto Repair, his disguise as Mark Johnson still holding, but his mind was anything but calm. The image of Liam standing up to Greg over Mr. Henry's repair burned in his chest, a mix of pride and shame that wouldn't fade. He'd seen the system he'd built turn into something ugly, a machine that chewed up the vulnerable and spit them out. Now, as the garage buzzed with its usual clatter, Keanu knew he couldn't just watch anymore. He was here to fix this, but every step felt heavier with the guilt of how far it had fallen. A few days later, a new customer walked in, her face etched with worry. Emily, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, clutched her SUV keys like a lifeline. She explained to Greg that her car was making a strange noise, a groan that scared her. Greg, ever the predator, jumped in, his voice slick but cold. "Inspection fee's $100, non-refundable, take it or leave it." Emily's shoulders tensed, her voice trembling as she admitted she couldn't afford it. She was a single mom, recently laid off, barely scraping by to feed her 2 kids. Greg sneered, dismissing her with a wave. "Then you shouldn't be driving a car you can't maintain." Keanu, from his corner, felt a stab of rage. This wasn't just business, it was cruelty. But before he could intervene, Liam was already moving. The young mechanic wiped his hands on his rag and stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. "I can check it quick, no charge, let me see what's wrong." Greg's face twisted, his bulk shifting as he barked. "You again, Carter? You're begging to get fired?" But Liam, he popped the hood, listened to the engine, and within minutes diagnosed it. Low brake fluid, an easy fix. "I'll top it off right now," he said to Emily, ignoring Greg's glare. The moment hit Keanu hard. He saw in Liam not just defiance, but a heart that refused to let injustice slide. As Liam worked, Emily's eyes filled with tears. She grabbed his arm, her voice breaking as she confessed, "I didn't know what I'd do if this broke down. My kids, I just lost my job. We're barely hanging on." Liam paused, his own eyes softening, the weight of her words sinking in. At 20, he was young, but in that moment, he felt the burden of a responsibility he hadn't asked for. He nodded, finishing the job quietly, his hands steady but his heart racing. For Keanu, watching from the sidelines, it was like looking in a mirror he'd avoided for years. Emily's story echoed the people he'd once vowed to help. The working families, the strivers, the ones crushed by systems that cared more about profit than people. He remembered why he'd started this business, to make a difference, to give back. But somewhere along the way he'd let it slip, trusting managers like Greg to handle things while he stayed in the shadows. Now seeing Liam's compassion, Keanu felt a pang of shame so deep it hurt. This kid, covered in grease and grit, was doing what he should have done all along. The confrontation with Greg escalated fast. The manager loomed over Liam, his voice a low growl. "You think you're some kind of savior? You're costing me money, and I'll bury you for it." Liam met his stare, undeterred. "Maybe, but I'm not letting you bleed people dry. She doesn't deserve this." The garage went quiet, the other mechanics pausing, sensing the storm. Keanu's fists clenched under his clipboard. He wanted to step in, to stop this, but he held back, knowing Liam needed to fight this battle himself. For now, Liam's mind raced as he worked. He thought of his own family, how they'd been cheated by shady shops like this, how his mom had cried over bills she couldn't pay. That memory fueled him, but it also scared him. What if he couldn't change anything? What if Greg was right and he was just a kid playing hero? Yet, seeing Emily's relief, hearing her whispered thank you as she drove off, he felt a flicker of purpose. He wasn't alone in this fight, even if he didn't know it yet. Keanu, scribbling notes, felt the same doubt, but from a different angle. He'd built an empire, but what good was it if it hurt people? Liam wasn't just a mechanic, he was a symbol of everything Keanu had lost: trust, integrity, the drive to make things right. The young man's actions stirred something in him, a memory of the idealism that had once defined him. But could he act on it? Or would he keep hiding behind his disguise, letting the system swallow more lives? The emotional weight of the moment was palpable. Emily's tears, Liam's resolve, Greg's greed. It all painted a picture of a world where the powerful preyed on the weak. And Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that he'd enabled it. He thought of the countless others like Emily, like Mr. Henry, discarded by a system he'd failed to oversee. Liam's bravery wasn't just inspiring, it was a call to action, a mirror forcing Keanu to face his own failures. As Greg stormed off, muttering threats, Liam stood there, hands shaking but chin up. Keanu watched, his heart pounding with a mix of hope and fear. He knew the fight was far from over, but for the first time he saw a path forward, not just for the garage, but for himself. Liam's compassion had cracked open a door, and Keanu was ready to step through, no matter the cost. The question wasn't whether one act could change everything, it was whether they both had the courage to try. The tension at Westside Auto Repair had been simmering, a quiet storm brewing beneath the clatter of tools and the hum of engines, but when Mr. Thomas stormed in, clutching a crumpled receipt, it erupted. His face was flushed, his eyes blazing with a mix of rage and desperation as he slapped the paper on the counter. "I paid $800 for brake repairs, and my car's still grinding. Took it to another shop. They said the parts were old, not new. What kind of scam are you running here?" His voice trembled, carrying the weight of betrayal and exhaustion. Greg Holloway, ever smug, leaned back, arms crossed, his smirk faltering only slightly. "Sounds like you're being lied to elsewhere. We do honest work," he said. Liam, wiping grease from his hands, froze mid-motion, his sharp eyes narrowing as the pieces fell into place. For months he'd suspected something was off. The inventory never matched the invoices. The parts locker always seemed suspiciously empty, but hearing Mr. Thomas's story made it undeniable. Without a second thought, he stepped forward, his voice cutting through the thick air like a blade. "That's a lie, Greg. I've seen the inventory. You've been swapping out good parts for junk and charging full price. Mr. Thomas got ripped off, and I'm not letting it slide." The garage fell silent, the usual chaos of clanging tools and revving engines halting as every mechanic turned to watch. Greg's face reddened, his bulk shifting as he loomed over Liam, his voice a low growl. "You're out of line, Carter. Keep this up and you're done here. I'll call security." But Liam stood his ground, his green eyes blazing with defiance. "Go ahead, but I'm not letting you rip off another person. Mr. Thomas deserves the truth." The tension was electric, the air crackling with the weight of their standoff, and Keanu felt his own pulse hammer in his chest. This kid, barely out of his teens, was risking everything for a principle Keanu had let slip away, a principle he now realized he'd abandoned too long ago. That moment broke something in Keanu, the guilt that had been gnawing at him, years of distance, years of trusting the wrong people, hit like a tidal wave. He couldn't stay silent any longer. Stepping forward, he pulled off his grease-stained cap and let it drop to the floor with a soft thud. The garage went dead quiet, the shock rippling through the room like a shockwave. "That's enough, Greg," he said, his voice calm but edged with steel. "I'm not Mark Johnson. I'm Keanu Reeves, owner of this entire chain, and I've seen everything you've done." Greg's jaw dropped, his usual swagger crumbling as the color drained from his face. The mechanics stared, wide-eyed, their disbelief palpable. Keanu turned to Mr. Thomas, his gaze steady and sincere. "You'll get your money back, and we'll fix your car, free of charge. I'm sorry this happened under my watch." Mr. Thomas's eyes welled up, his voice breaking as he whispered, "Thank you. I thought no one would believe me." The old man's gratitude hit Keanu like a punch, a sharp reminder of how many others had suffered silently, their voices drowned out by greed. He faced Greg again, his tone dropping to a dangerous calm. "You turned this place into a scam, preying on people who can't fight back. It stops now." Greg sputtered, desperation creeping into his voice. "You can't just barge in and fire me. I've built this shop." But Keanu cut him off, pulling out a thick folder of evidence. Receipts, customer complaints, inventory logs he'd been meticulously collecting. "I have proof," he said, his words slicing through Greg's protests. "You've overcharged, lied, and bullied. You're done here." The folder hit the counter with a thud, each page a testament to the rot Keanu had let fester. The other mechanics, who'd once feared Greg, began to murmur, their eyes shifting to Liam with newfound respect. They'd been complicit, scared to speak up, but now they saw the truth. They'd been victims too, trapped in a system that valued profit over people, just as much as the customers had been. Liam stood there, exhausted but proud, his chest tight with a mix of triumph and fear. He'd stood up, but the uncertainty lingered. What if Keanu's promise was just words? What if this was another shift in power, not real change? Those doubts were drowned out by the sight of Mr. Thomas. tears streaming down his face as he shook Keanu's hand. "I never thought I'd see justice," the old man said, his voice raw with emotion. Liam felt a lump in his throat, the weight of that moment settling deep in his bones. He'd fought for this, for people like Mr. Thomas, for Emily, for Mr. Henry, and it was worth it, even if it cost him everything. For Keanu, the scene was a reckoning, a mirror held up to his own failures. He'd come here to fix a problem, but what he found was a wound he'd helped create. The system he'd built had hurt too many, and Liam's courage had forced him to face it head-on. Standing there, surrounded by the stunned faces of mechanics and customers, Keanu felt the shame of his inaction transform into a burning resolve. This wasn't just about one garage or one manager. It was about a culture of greed he'd let take root, a culture that mirrored the broader injustices he now saw so clearly. But it was also about hope, embodied in the kid who refused to look away, who demanded better even when the odds were stacked against him. The social injustice was stark now, laid bare for all to see. Big businesses like his could crush the vulnerable, whether by design or neglect, and Keanu knew he'd been part of that neglect. Liam, though, was different. A beacon of integrity in a sea of compromise. As Greg grabbed his jacket and stormed out, cursing under his breath, the garage felt lighter. But the fight wasn't over. Keanu turned to Liam, his voice low but firm. "You showed me what this place should be. I'm with you now, not just here, but everywhere. We're going to rebuild this together." Liam nodded, the fear in his eyes giving way to a flicker of determination. He wasn't alone anymore, and that realization hit hard, anchoring him in a way he hadn't expected. The other mechanics, once silent, began to nod too, their respect for Liam growing, their own grudges against Greg surfacing. They'd seen the truth, Greg's lies, Keanu's authority, Liam's heart, and they knew things were changing. The garage wasn't just a workplace now, it was a battleground, a place where they could fight for something bigger. Keanu clapped Liam on the shoulder, a silent promise passing between them, a bond forged in the heat of that moment. The road ahead would be tough, filled with skepticism, resistance, and the lingering shadow of corruption. But for the first time, Keanu believed they could rebuild something honest, something fair, something that would honor the trust of people like Mr. Thomas, Emily, and Mr. Henry. Mr. Thomas's tears, Liam's defiance, the mechanic's quiet support, it all wove together into a story of redemption, of a system starting to heal. Yet, as the dust settled and the garage hummed back to life, Keanu knew the real challenge was just beginning. Could they turn this moment into lasting change, or would the weight of a broken world pull them back down? Only their resolve, and the hope they'd sparked, would answer that question. The air in Westside Auto Repair felt different after Greg's exit, lighter, but charged with uncertainty. Keanu stood at the center, his presence commanding yet reflective, as the mechanics shuffled back to their stations, casting wary glances at Liam. The young mechanic, still reeling from the confrontation, wiped his hands on his rag, his chest tight with a mix of pride and doubt. He'd stood up, but now what? The garage was his to lead, and that thought was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. Keanu approached, his voice low but steady. "You've shown me what this place can be, Liam. I'm putting you in charge. We're fixing this, refunds for cheated customers, retraining the team, rebuilding trust. I'll back you with everything I've got, financially and legally." Liam's breath caught, the weight of the responsibility crashing down. At 20, he'd never imagined running anything, let alone a place this broken. But Keanu's trust ignited something in him, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, he could make a difference. The road ahead wasn't easy. Some of the older mechanics, like Tony, bristled at the change. He sidled up to Liam later, his voice skeptical. "You're just a kid. What do you know about running this place? If you start playing saint, we're the ones who'll lose our jobs." Liam felt the sting of doubt, his confidence wavering. He knew Tony wasn't wrong. His inexperience was a target. But he also knew the old ways had to go. The support of customers like Emily, Mr. Henry, and Mr. Thomas kept him grounded. Their gratitude, their stories of survival, reminded him why he was fighting. One afternoon, Liam visited Mr. Henry at his apartment, a cramped, dingy space that smelled of loneliness and despair. The old man, frail but warm, invited him in, sharing tea and memories. "I used to work the docks," Mr. Henry said, his voice soft but heavy with regret. "Built things with my hands, raised a family. Now it's just me, scraping by on scraps." Liam listened, his heart aching as he realized how many like Mr. Henry had been forgotten, crushed by a system that valued profit over people. He felt a sharp pang of shame. Why hadn't he done more sooner? That moment sealed his resolve. West Side wouldn't just be a garage, it would be a lifeline for those in need. For Keanu, the shift was just as profound. Standing in the office, flipping through files of customer complaints and fraudulent invoices, he saw the full extent of his failure. His distance from the ground level had let greed take root, and now he was determined to root it out. He vowed to visit every shop in his chain, to build a culture of honesty from the top down. Liam's courage had been his wake-up call, a mirror reflecting the man he'd once been and could be again. He wasn't just fixing a business, he was reclaiming his purpose. Back at the garage, change began to take shape. New signs went up: honest service, fair prices. Keanu funded refunds for customers like Mr. Thomas, and Liam led training sessions teaching the team about ethics and accountability. It wasn't perfect, some, like Tony, still grumbled, but the tide was turning. Customers trickled back, their trust hesitant but growing. Emily returned one day, her eyes bright with hope as she thanked Liam again, her kids waving from the car. That sight hit Liam hard, a reminder that he wasn't alone. He had Keanu, the customers, even the mechanics who were starting to believe. Keanu watched it all, his heart swelling with a mix of pride and responsibility. He saw in Liam not just a leader, but a symbol of what he'd lost: faith in the power of one person to change things. The garage wasn't just a business now, it was a mission, a chance to right wrongs. He clapped Liam on the shoulder one evening as they locked up, the quiet between them filled with unspoken promise. "You're doing what I should have done years ago," Keanu said. "We'll build something worth believing in." Liam nodded, the doubt in his eyes fading, replaced by a steady resolve. He wasn't just fixing cars anymore, he was fixing a system, one honest act at a time. The challenges were still there, skepticism from some, the weight of expectations, but for the first time he felt ready. Keanu's support was a lifeline, a reminder that even the biggest fights started small. Together they were proving that fairness could rise from the ashes of greed. The emotional depth of their partnership struck Keanu late that night as he sat in his office staring at old photos of the first garage he'd opened. He'd dreamed of helping communities, of being a force for good, but somewhere along the way he'd lost sight of that. Liam's fire, Mr. Henry's story, Emily's tears. They were all pieces of a puzzle he was finally piecing together. This wasn't just about West Side, it was about redemption, about proving that one honest act could inspire a chain reaction. As the garage lights dimmed and the city hummed outside, Liam and Keanu shared a quiet moment of hope. The road ahead was long, but they weren't walking it alone. The injustice they'd uncovered, the way big businesses could crush the vulnerable, hadn't been erased, but it had been challenged. And in that challenge, they found something worth fighting for, a future where people weren't just numbers. For Keanu, it was a second chance. For Liam, it was a first step. Together, they were building more than a garage. They were building trust. A year later, Westside Auto Repair stood as a symbol of honesty, its reputation rebuilt brick by brick. Liam, now 21, had grown into a leader who inspired not just the mechanics, but the entire community. His hands, once trembling with doubt, now moved with confidence as he oversaw the shop, mentoring younger workers with the same fire that had once driven him. Keanu, no longer hidden behind a disguise, visited often, his presence a steady anchor. He'd become Liam's mentor, their bond forged in the crucible of that first fight against injustice. The garage had evolved too. They launched free repair programs for the poor, drawing attention from media and charities, a beacon of hope in a city where too many were left behind. Customers like Emily, Mr. Henry, and Mr. Thomas returned, their trust restored, their stories fueling the shop's mission. But Keanu and Liam both knew the fight wasn't over. Injustice still loomed large. Other shops, other systems, other lives crushed by greed. Their victory was just one step, a small crack in a vast wall, but it was enough. One evening, as they locked up, Liam turned to Keanu, his voice quiet but firm. One honest act can't change the whole world, but it can change a life, and that's enough to start. Keanu nodded, his eyes reflecting the weight of that truth. You taught me that, Liam. Leadership isn't just about giving orders, it's about listening, acting, and believing in people. The words hung between them, a shared lesson etched in every repaired car, every grateful smile. The garage's new sign, honest service, fair prices, glowed in the dusk, a promise kept. But as they stepped outside, Keanu felt the responsibility deepen. He knew their story wasn't just theirs, it was a call to action. We're not done, he said, clapping Liam on the shoulder. This fight needs everyone. Think about what you can do, what we all can do. Stick with us, share this journey, and let's keep pushing for change. The night stretched ahead, but for the first time, neither felt alone. Their battle against injustice had sparked something bigger, a ripple of hope that might one day grow into a wave. As they parted, Liam glanced back at the garage, its lights a beacon in the darkness. For Keanu, it was redemption. For Liam, it was purpose. Together they'd proven that honesty could heal, even if the world wasn't yet whole. Keep watching, Keanu called out, his voice carrying a promise. There's more to come. Join us, fight with us, and let's build something better. I believe Liam and Keanu's story shows that one honest act can ignite change, no matter how big the system. Some might say it's naive to think small fights matter, but I see strength in their stand. It's proof we all have power to push back. What do you think? Does courage like theirs really shift the world, or is it just a drop in the ocean? Drop your thoughts below, I'd love to hear. Thanks for joining this journey for believing in the fight for fairness. Hit subscribe, share this with someone who needs hope, and let's keep the conversation going. Together, we can build more stories like this.